Well, if you stuck with me this long, congratulations. We're on chapter 3, A Cast Converges, and so obviously that's where we all came together. But first of all, at the end of my last one, I talked about the Mystery Science Theater trading cards and that we're doing a Manos series. So anyway, go to the link on the Kickstarter and check that out. I'm not sure, but this has been in my family for a long time, and a lot of the casts or the sets, the props, the the furniture, not the couch, but a lot of things came from our home, and this may be the original one, but I don't know. I'm going to look that up. And then one more fun thing here is, this is actually a goat horn that I found here on my property about 2 years ago. I have about an acre and a half, and I live out in the country, and it was just laying there. I've lived here for 15 years in this house, so I don't know where that came from. Okay, let's get started. Chapter 3 is kind of long, so I'm going to read half of it, and then I'll read the other half. And I haven't decided if I'm going to share them both on the same day. I haven't decided. So let's get started. Chapter 3, A Cast Converges. Hal Warren had great vision and the tenacious spirit of a successful salesman. Since first writing the movie script, he'd been thinking of how to accomplish the lofty goal of bringing his story to the big screen. And now it was all coming together with the convergence of his dream cast and crew, a group of enthusiastic theater people who would sing for a dime and couldn't believe their luck at this amazing opportunity that had just dropped into their laps. Out of the same group of actors, Hal had found nearly everyone he needed. Attorney, stockholders, cameraman, set designer, makeup, props, and film editor. Hal had been harboring the dream of movie making for virtually his entire life. He'd been actively searching and waiting for all the pieces to fall into place for his big break, and now looked to be the perfect time to implement his plan. How amazing that it would happen in the West Texas town of El Paso, right on the border of Mexico in the middle of a vast desert. But why not? Everything he needed was right here. And this way he could be the big fish and not competing with any number of other wannabe filmmakers that flooded the stage in other places like New York or California. No one was making films in El Paso. No one knew that he had never done this before, but he knew he could sell the idea now that he had the people in his sights. If anyone could do it, it would be him. And as he looked around at the castmates and crew on this current play, he knew he had struck gold. Henry IV ended its run on April 10th, 1966, and the cast would be in rehearsal for the new movie by the end of the month. To start, Hal cast William Bryan Jennings as the Mono sheriff. Bill had been in and around the stage and musical venues for many years. He loved the theater and was a favorite in music circles around El Paso because of his terrific vocal talent. He sang in church choirs and as a soloist at ladies' club events. He performed opera at Texas Western and had a reputation as a song and dance man in the Lions Club minstrel shows, apparently still a popular form of entertainment in the mid-60s. Bill enjoyed acting too. At the festival, he played Senator Longwater in Finian's Rainbow in September 1965, Cleante in Tartuffe, and Ben Hubbard in The Little Foxes. If Bill could have made a living singing and performing, he would have grabbed that life in a moment. Doing the responsible thing, however, he'd gone to law school and began a career with the El Paso District Attorney before going into practice for himself. But his law career didn't prevent him from finding many opportunities to perform. Bill's role as the doctor in Henry IV caught Hal's eye. That, and his profession as a private practice lawyer. Hal needed a lawyer to help him with the formation of his production company and to draw up all the contracts. What better to fulfill that role than to make Bill president of the company and offer him a role in the movie at the same time? Bill already knew many of the other Manos cast members from other shows. He had been in local productions of Oklahoma with Bernie Rosenblum and John Reynolds, and Finian's Rainbow with John. He knew my dad not only at the festival, but through volunteer work on the board of directors for the Boys Club where Dad was executive director. Bill was a large, fatherly, authoritative man who was perfect for the role of sheriff. It didn't hurt that in real life he'd been assistant district attorney with connections to the El Paso Sheriff's Department through his friend, Sheriff Mike Sullivan. This made him the perfect person to secure official uniform shirts, badges, and a patrol car. Bill also was friendly with Judge Colbert Colwell, who had worked with him in the DA's office while the judge was still a lawyer. The judge's ranch back property on the outskirts of El Paso would end up being the setting for the Manos lair. Not long after making sure Bill was in, Hal talked to Dad, knowing it to be a sure thing. Dad was doing anything that became available in the theater and art world. He'd been part of nearly every production the festival had put on since he'd arrived in El Paso 2 years before, and had done several art exhibits around town as well. Hal knew without a doubt that Tom Naiman would come willingly and contribute much to the project. He also had met Tom's family and knew he had a young daughter about the age the script called for. That, combined with the fact that said child's parents would be deeply involved in the production, seemed like destiny or fate. I remember Dad coming home earlier than expected one day, saying he had something important to talk to me about. I remember it being a significant moment of expectation and apprehension when he knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with me. I'm going to be in a movie, and they need a little girl to be in the movie too. Would you like to be that little girl? Whatever important thing I could have been expecting my dad to say that day, I never would have guessed that. I just looked at him for a moment, thinking it through. On one hand, I was a very shy child and didn't like being the center of anyone's attention. On the other hand, I adored my dad and would have strapped myself to his back if I could have, just to be close to him. So I whispered, "I don't know." He replied, "That's okay, honey. You don't have to if you don't want. We could always find another little girl." That sealed it. Yes, absolutely, I wanted that part. No other little girl was going to be an actress and spend time with my daddy while I stayed home. In retrospect, I'm sure Dad was just using old-fashioned reverse psychology on me and knew all along that no one would have to go looking for another kid. John Reynolds, cast as the Master's minion Torgo, had a small part in Henry IV and was also assistant stage manager. John and Dad had been friends for a while, both in and outside of the theater. Like Dad, John was interested in taking his acting to another level. And like the other actors, John joined Hal's project willingly, happy to have another role lined up so quickly. John's life was focused on theater. He was only 24 at the time, but already a serious method actor who'd been honing his craft in the El Paso area for several years. He was a quiet, brooding, sensitive young man who loved to write poetry and fulfill his passion on stage. It seemed that for a time he was in every production El Paso had to offer. In September and October 1965 at the festival, he played Finian in Finian's Rainbow, Cory in The Crucible, and Pee-wee in Orpheus Descending. He had been in Taming of the Shrew with Robert Bob Smith Jr., composer of the Manos soundtrack, at Texas Western in 1964, and had been stage manager for a number of productions. Even his writing made the stage at the festival in 1966, when the theater adopted one of his verses to be recited at the opening of every production. Bob Guidry, Manos, director of cinematography, film editor, played John the Scribe in Henry IV, and was a local sportscaster, cameraman, and news director on KROD Channel 4, one of the 3 television stations in El Paso in 1966. Bob had been on the theater scene for a while and had done Mr. Roberts at the university. Both he and his first wife, Pat, had been in The Odd Couple at the festival. He also had done roles in Majority of One, Gypsy, and made his directorial debut with Wonderful Town at the Upstairs Theater. Bob got involved in anything to do with theater and performance, whether in the spotlight or behind the scenes. He'd been wanting to move forward in his television career and step more into film, with the ultimate dream of owning his own film company, according to correspondence between Bob and his best friend and poker buddy, Bernie Rosenblum. Bernie also loved the stage and had been around theater in El Paso for several years. In September 1965, he played Ali Hakim in Oklahoma at the Upstairs Theater in downtown El Paso. He was a student at Texas Western University, where he was often cast in playful roles, including Lord Fancourt in Charlie's Aunt, a role that the El Paso Herald-Post lauded as the lifeblood of the play's humor. He was Genie of The Ring in Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp in September 1966, in between filming Manos and its infamous premiere. Bernie caught much of his playfulness, he carried much of his playfulness to the set of Manos, where he and Bob entertained themselves by getting on Hal's every last nerve with their antics. They soon renamed the film Mangoes, Cans of Fruit, to the ongoing consternation of the producer-director. Although Bernie hadn't been in Henry IV, he had his friendship with Bob, and attendance at Bob's on Friday nights for drinking cigars and poker, where Hal Warren and Bob Smith Jr. were semi-regulars. Bernie and Bob were both interested in the technical aspects of theater and film, and had already been experimenting with film on their own before they began discussing filmmaking with Hal over cards. Hal had talked about the script he'd written and explained how to get it done. Bob and Bernie had some ideas too, imagining a little creative leeway as the team of director of cinematography and assistant director. Hal's movie project sounded like an enticing opportunity for them to expand skills, make new connections, and eventually even make some money. Ultimately, in Manos, Bob took charge of directing the filming, setting the shots, reviewing the dailies, and doing the rough edits on the work print. Bernie's job were as an actor, cameraman, stunt coordinator, assistant director, and lighting, along with the added benefit of showing off his 1963 Triumph Spitfire 4 for the kissing scenes. Hal aimed high and went with his gut and against general rules for filmmaking, including the idea that kids and animals should be avoided unless for the sake of the story. Hal's story had 1 child and 2 animals. The child had been cast, and he had his animal actors already in mind. One would play the family pet, and the other would play the evil master's demon dog. My family conveniently owned the perfect-looking dog for the master, even though he was more family pet than Demon Dog in demeanor, and what a sweet, goofy dog he was. He had no idea what he was supposed to do, but he sure was happy to be there. He got cast only because he happened to belong to the actor playing the master, which made things really convenient for transportation and appearance schedules. Ironically, his name was Shanka, a Native American word that translates to dog, much in the way Manos translates to hand. The other animal actor was to play the family pet that gets offed after just a few scenes. As fate would have it, Peppy, the Warrens' black poodle, was available for the part. Like Shanka, Peppy was a dog with negligible training and somewhat hard to hold on to. Being the director's pet, he won his role by default as easily as Shanka was cast for his. Hal cast himself in the sympathetic role of husband and father Mike. The actual character of Mike, as he was written and portrayed by Hal, came off as anything but sympathetic. A casting choice that baffles fans and detractors alike. So that's about halfway through this chapter. I'm going to stop here because I just wanted to download. I just need to make sure this thing works. Thank you for being here. See you next time.